Imagine you have someone in your life, someone you call when something good happens, and someone you call when something goes wrong. Someone whose name you speak with warmth when you describe your circle. Someone who has been close to you for long enough that you stopped being careful about the fact that they are there. But lately, something in you has shifted. You cannot fully describe it. Nothing dramatic has happened. There has been no obvious fight, no moment of clear betrayal, no single incident you can point to as proof. But your heart, that inner compass that Allah placed in every one of us, the fitrah, the pure natural instinct that recognizes truth before the mind has formed its opinion, your heart has been sending a signal. Something is off, and you do not know whether to trust it or dismiss it as your own insecurity. My dear brothers and sisters, what you are about to hear is not a call to paranoia. Islam does not ask you to be suspicious of everyone. It does not encourage you to build walls or treat your relationships like threats. But it does something powerful, something the Qur'an does with remarkable consistency. It names things. It takes the vague, uncomfortable feeling in your chest and gives it language. It says, here is what this looks like. Here is what produces it. Here is what to do with it. Today we are going to walk through 7 specific signs, drawn from the Qur'an, from the Sunnah, and from the lived human reality of what genuinely harmful relationships actually look like, that tell you someone in your circle may be working against your peace, your growth, or your connection to Allah. Not because you need to live in fear, but because your Iman is precious, your spiritual energy is limited, and the Qur'an itself is full of careful, detailed warnings about the kinds of people who can quietly drain what Allah has placed in you without you noticing until significant damage has been done. Every sign we cover will have a story attached to it, a human moment, something recognizable. And by the time we reach the end, you will not just recognize these signs in theory. You will have seen them clearly enough to know exactly what to do when you encounter them. Stay with this completely, because some of what you are about to hear may feel uncomfortably, specifically familiar, and that recognition is not something to push away. It is the beginning of clarity. Sign 1. The person whose kindness has an expiration date. There was a man in a community who had a reputation for warmth. When a family needed help during a move, he was first at the door. When someone faced hardship, he arrived with practical support and the specific presence of someone who seemed to genuinely care. People spoke well of him without hesitation. He was the person you trusted with what was difficult, because his response to difficulty always felt safe. But there was a pattern, and nobody had connected the dots yet. Whenever someone confided in him, really confided, shared something private, something they would only offer to a person they completely trusted, that information had a way of surfacing later, not immediately, sometimes weeks afterward. A comment in a group setting that landed too specifically, a casual question to someone else that revealed a level of detail that should not have been available to them. And I heard from someone who could only have heard from him. The warmth in the moment of receiving the confidence was genuine, but its purpose was collection. He was building a picture of people's vulnerabilities, and the kindness was the method of access. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, named this specific type of person with precision. Among the worst people on the Day of Judgment is the one who has 2 faces, who comes to this group with one face and to that group with another face. Reported in Sahih al-Bukhari. 2 faces, not simply someone who is different in different contexts. That is normal human flexibility. 2 deliberate, separate presentations, maintained simultaneously, with full awareness of the difference between them. Warmth in your presence, a different posture entirely in your absence. This is the precise definition of hypocrisy in how it shows up in human relationships. Not always in the dramatic theological sense, but in the specific, interpersonal sense of a person who presents one version of themselves to your face and holds another version of you in their mind when you are gone. The additional markers the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, gave us help clarify the pattern further. When he speaks, he lies. When he makes a promise, he breaks it. When he is trusted, he betrays the trust. reported in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. These are not occasional failures, the kinds of things every human being falls into from time to time. They are consistent patterns, and consistent patterns over time become readable. How do you recognize the person whose kindness has an expiration date? First, watch what happens in the weeks after you have been vulnerable with someone. After you shared something difficult or private, did the energy in the relationship shift in any subtle way? Did information appear somewhere it should not have? Did the person begin to treat you differently, with a slight edge, a new quality of leverage, a knowing that does not fit what you willingly gave them? Second, watch for warmth that appears on schedule with what they need. The person who is generous and attentive precisely when they want access to something from you, your resources, your social connections, your endorsement, your goodwill, and whose warmth quietly thins or disappears once they have obtained what they came for. Real generosity is not tied to the timing of need. Conditional kindness always follows that timing with predictable precision. Third, watch for the discrepancy between public and private. The person who speaks of you warmly in front of you, but whose comments about you in your absence, which reach you eventually, as they always do, carry a different quality entirely, as if the audience changes what they feel comfortable expressing. Allah says in the Qur'an, "In their hearts is disease, and Allah has increased their disease." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:10. The disease is internal, the performance is external, and the performance is specifically designed to pass as the real thing, which is what makes this type of person particularly difficult to recognize early, and particularly harmful when they have been given significant access before the pattern becomes clear. You are not required to accuse anyone without evidence. But once a pattern has been established, once you have seen it not from one incident, but from a consistent sequence of behaviors that fit together, you are permitted to read it. You are actually being wise by reading it. Your fitrah exists precisely for this purpose. And when it raises an alarm consistently about the same person, paying attention to that alarm is not paranoia. It is the appropriate use of a faculty Allah placed in you as protection. Sign 2. The person whose complaints slowly become your worldview. There is a form of harm so gradual and so quiet that most people do not identify it until they are already thoroughly inside it. It begins ordinarily enough. A friend who is going through something hard needs to process. They share frustration about their work, their family, their circumstances. You listen, you empathize. You feel like a genuine friend for showing up the way a genuine friend should, with presence, patience, and care. And then it repeats. The next conversation covers the same territory, and the next after that. Their job is impossible. Their circumstances are uniquely unjust. Other people have it easier. Nothing seems to be improving, and the general direction of life is fundamentally and reliably disappointing. You are still showing up, but something is happening in you that you have not yet named. One day, you are on the phone with someone you love, and you notice that your language has changed. You are speaking about your own life in the same rhythm, the same tonal register, the same default orientation toward what is wrong rather than what is right. Things you used to receive with gratitude, you are now presenting as grievances. A general dissatisfaction has settled into your chest that was not there a year ago, and you cannot identify when it arrived. It arrived through proximity. The Qur'an is clear about what gratitude does. If you are grateful, I will surely increase you in favor. Surah Ibrahim 14:7. This is not motivational language. This is a divine mechanism. Gratitude opens a channel. The person who lives in genuine acknowledgement of what they have, even in the middle of difficulty, is oriented correctly. They are positioned for increase and complaint, sustained, constant, unrelenting complaint that has become a way of seeing rather than a response to a specific difficulty, closes that channel. It orients the heart downward, toward deficit, toward what is absent. When you spend significant time immersed in the frequency of that orientation, your own orientation migrates toward it without any conscious decision on your part. This is not metaphor. This is how human beings are formed by their consistent exposure. This is not about judging people who are processing genuine pain. Everyone needs seasons of being held while they carry something difficult. That is what community is for. This is about the person for whom complaint is not a season, but a permanent state, a default lens through which all of reality is filtered, all the time, without variation and without resolution. The test is simple but telling. How do you feel when you leave their presence? Do you return to your own life with more energy or less? Are you more aware of what you have to be grateful for? Or have you just spent an hour having your own internal list of what is wrong quietly extended? The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Look at those who are below you in worldly matters, and do not look at those who are above you. This way you will not undervalue the blessings Allah has given you." Reported in Sahih Muslim. The direction of your gaze matters enormously. The person who consistently trains your gaze toward what others have that you lack, who frames your life as a series of deprivations rather than a series of blessings, is actively working against the specific prophetic instruction for how to maintain contentment. And contentment, qana'ah, the settled satisfaction with what Allah has decreed, is not merely a pleasant attitude. It is a spiritual position that affects your relationship with Allah, your capacity for genuine worship, and your overall functioning as a believer. Someone who steadily erodes that contentment through the contagion of their chronic dissatisfaction is doing you real harm. Not intentionally, often, but real harm nonetheless. Recognize this pattern, and then make an honest decision about how much of your interior life you can afford to offer to this relationship without losing what you cannot afford to lose. Sign 3. The person who makes you question your own conscience. This is the most subtle sign on this list, and because of its subtlety, it is also often the most deeply damaging. There was a young woman who, by anyone's observation, was a grounded person. She knew what she believed, she was clear about her values, and she had never spent significant energy second-guessing her own judgments. She was steady in a way that came from genuine interior stability. And then, gradually, so gradually that she could not name the moment it began, she started to hesitate. Not about major decisions, about ordinary ones, about things she had always navigated without difficulty. She would express a perspective and immediately wonder whether she had the right to hold it. She would set a limit and then spend 3 days questioning whether she had been fair. She would make a clear decision and find herself explaining it to herself, as if something was regularly requiring her to justify what had previously simply been hers. The source was not an inner crisis, it was a specific person. This person never said anything overtly unkind, but they had a particular way of receiving her certainties. A raised eyebrow here, and "Are you sure about that?" At moments when she had been entirely sure. A pattern of presenting her confident choices as possibly short-sighted, or possibly selfish, or possibly not as considered as she imagined. Not constantly, strategically, just often enough, and in just the right moments, that the accumulated effect was a woman who had slowly stopped trusting her own perception. And when her perception weakened, who did she find herself turning to for input? The person who had eroded it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes a specific type of person in the Qur'an, and among the people is one whose speech pleases you in worldly life, and he calls Allah to witness as to what is in his heart, yet he is the fiercest of opponents. Surah Al-Baqarah 2 verse 204. The fiercest of opponents, calling Allah as his witness, with pleasant speech. This is the Qur'an's description of a person whose outward presentation and inner posture are not aligned, someone who has weaponized the language of care. The manipulator's toolkit is rarely crude. It rarely includes anything you could describe in a sentence and have everyone immediately agree was wrong. Instead, it includes strategic uncertainty, delivered in the language of concern. "I just worry about you. I say this only because I care. Have you fully thought this through?" Offered not once, in a moment of genuine care, but consistently, at moments where your confidence was intact and the concern lands as a diminishment. The Qur'an and the Sunnah, consistently affirm the validity of the heart's own knowledge. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Righteousness is what the heart feels content with, and the heart feels settled about. And sin is what creates doubt in the soul and moves around in the chest, even if people have given you their opinions in its favor." Reported in the Musnad of Ahmad. Your heart was given to you by Allah with a built-in orientation toward truth. That orientation is not infallible. We all have blind spots, and genuine counsel from trustworthy people is a gift. But the key word is trustworthy. The counsel of someone whose consistent effect on you is confusion rather than clarity is not the counsel you need. The test is whether you feel clearer or more confused after their input. Real care produces clarity, the kind where you see your situation more accurately, where you leave the conversation more capable of making a sound decision. Manipulation produces fog, the kind where everything that was previously distinct becomes blurry, where you feel less capable of judging your own experience after the conversation than before it. If someone's consistent influence is fog, if you are regularly more uncertain about your own perceptions, more disconnected from your reliable inner knowing after being with them, that is not guidance, that is interference, and recognizing it is the first step toward reclaiming what it has cost you. Sign 4. The person who collects your wounds like evidence. There is a type of listening that most people have experienced, though they often cannot name what made it feel different from real listening until they have seen the full pattern play out. You share something difficult with someone, a failure, a struggle, a mistake you made, a painful season you went through. They listen well, they seem genuinely engaged, they ask questions that suggest they understand. You feel held. You leave lighter than you arrived, grateful to have someone safe to process with.